I've got this diagonal. Across this central section, I've got this one square.
You notice I'm not going to put my hand in the shadow, I hope.
My knight's out, I have my bishop out, I don't have a king-size castle. Change of power for power. Right now, these pawns are so beautifully placed for my advantage. And this one does as well.
And this one does, but these, it's not a good idea in the opening to move the wing pawns if you can at all help.
All right, Jeff and I are going to put together a video on some basic opening chess strategies and ideas that he has found extremely successful in his games. We're going to discuss some ideas on the openings and how we can improve our chess play.
I think today we're going to focus more on sound chess principles, opening theory, versus memorized openings. You can pick up any chess book and read through variations, encouraging to do, but actually why certain moves are more advantageous than other moves may not fully be discussed, and we want to focus on some generalities of theory that'll help improve any chess game.
So there, take that.
All right, so Jeff, your Uncle Larry, my oldest brother, used to always trounce me saying, he never told me for years, but he would always either push a king pawn to the center or he would push a queen pawn to the center. And being a young kid, I was either doing something like this and this because I thought, well, my rook's powerful, so I can bring my rook out, and then I've got a heck of an attack against his pawn if he brought his pawn out there. So why don't you think that works?
Well, I primarily think that doesn't work because rooks are powerful pieces, definitely. However, a rook is only powerful in as much as it has ability to move. And since it moves in straight ranks and files, when you have your pieces still on the board, it hedges it. You have to declutter the board. You need to liquidate the pieces before you can really get your rooks into play. The other problem that you have is that there are easy paths to attack the rook on the diagonals with the bishops naturally.
So show me what you mean.
All right. Well,
go ahead. You show me a general opening.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say let's start with the king pawn here.
And I've seen people do this.
Now, the moment I see you do that, the first thing that goes through my mind is that this is a weak square right here.
What do you mean weak square?
That the only thing protecting it right here is the pawn, and if you move that pawn, then you've got the bishop. But if you move your knight here, or if you do move your rook up here, I have an easy ability to take it if I open up my bishop here. The other thing that I think of when you open that up is that your center is left neglected, and I want to have the ability to control the center.
So what? Okay, open up. Open up.
Controlling the center doesn't necessarily mean that I have pieces that can directly see. And then with that piece right there, I can easily just take my bishop and take your rook.
So why isn't that a good idea? That's called winning the exchange, isn't it?
No, not when you have two doubled up.
No, I mean you did.
Oh, right.
You won the exchange.
Yeah, I won the exchange.
With the rook versus bishop. Because a rook is technically way better than a bishop.
See, the other thing is that you have doubled up pawns way out here in the peripheral. You have no other pawn to protect them. You're going to have to protect them with a major piece.
Yeah, but they're buddies.
They probably are. The other thing is that you've completely ruined your king side, so you're going to have to go for a queen side castle.
Good argument.
And so I already know that I'm going to start moving my king to the king side, get him protected where you already are weak and have to worry about protecting your own pieces, let alone forming an offense.
All right. Okay, so you and I both know at this point, so we may as well explain in the video. What's this idea with the center? Go ahead and start opening a center open, and let's try to discuss the theory and the idea and the philosophy behind why these four squares right here are the most important squares on the chessboard. If you don't know that, it's time to know that. And we're going to demonstrate a little bit of why that is the way it is. So.
One of the things that, well, I think to begin with, one of the things that we should mention is that chess is a game of geography. A lot of people think that
geography?
Truly is.
I flunked geography, dude.
Canada's to the north.
Canada is to the north.
So
That means Mexico's to the west, dude.
southwest.
Details.
So, what's important about the center is that it really is sort of a microcosm of what is happening on the board in general. And you can really think about whoever has more pressure on the center will have better developed pieces and have more options. If you look at purely, take a knight for instance, and we'll put a knight where here,
Okay.
which is the F3, where the knight can attack 2 center squares and then 2 flank squares right here, versus and that's making a move toward controlling the center. Now, if you were to put it over here on H3, half of its potential is already dead. It's got these 2 squares it can move to, but it's got nothing over here, and so it's already 50%.
And these 2 are completely neglected.
Well, it doesn't matter so much. I'm just trying to say that the effectiveness of the piece is reduced in half.
Right.
By the fact that it can't even get to those 2 squares. Now, it does attack 2 different squares, and so doing that, and there are times when you want to push it. Generally speaking, though, it's going to be more effective. Yeah.
Well, I've seen several games of, what's his name? Yeah, what's his nose? Where he pushed the Alexander Alekin. When he put his knight on the rim in an opening play, the very next move, he was pulling it off the rim. He did not leave it on the rim. And I know I've played games where I've tried to mimic that, and someone has clobbered me in the center, and I can never get my cockeyed knight off the rim. So be careful putting your knights on the rim.
I would have to look at specific games. I have to look at specific games to understand exactly why that is. But I'm guessing that if lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. That if you're going to
edit it, relax.
If you're going to bring your knight out to the edge and then bring it here, since you're already going to be using 2 moves,
That's true.
You're probably best to do that when you know that they have a piece that is unable to respond on the board. You have to have the tempo to do it.
Say, for instance, if we were to do something like this, and then I'm just quickly moving so that we can... Whoop, I didn't want to do that. Let's say this. If we have a bishop pin on the knight, this knight affecting this square and this square, if you was to put that on the rim, that would do absolutely no stinking good. Here, you would at least have access to these squares. If you moved it here, and that gave me a chance to bring up my bishop again, and then you moved it here, you still have these squares, but not this one.
Right, and then...
So that's the disadvantage of putting it on the rim and then moving it again. Besides, you use 2 tempo, like you're saying.
Right.
So.
And then your knight will get harried by one of the open pawns
Constantly,
here.
won't it?
Yeah.
Mine always do. Mine get harried even though I don't put it on the rim. So when you open pawns, what do you think is one of the best openings?
I like the Queen's Gambit opening. I'm a constant. Ironically,
so what's this do?
The Queen's Gambit opening, the primary feature of the Queen's Gambit opening, other than the King's Gambit, the primary feature of the Queen's Pawn opening versus the King's Pawns opening is that the center pawn still has protection from the Queen.
Okay.
If you look at the King's Pawn opening, when I put that piece out there, before you even make your move, when I put the piece out there, it is unprotected. I will have to protect that piece with my next move. I'm going to have to either, if you...
That's interesting, yeah. So if I was to do this, well, I wouldn't do that. Yeah. But if I do this, and I wouldn't do that, but that's a good point. You have to protect it or move it.
Exactly. And so in this case, I would be aggressive, and I would force you to move
Absolutely.
your
Absolutely.
Your knight.
And of course, what I could do is I could come down here and take one of my own pawns, and then I could have a power on the front.
I've tried that once.
And he didn't let you do it.
No.
Did he? That sucker. I hate it when people say abide by the rules.
And then another interesting note, just in general on openings, Alekine's defense, always a bad defense. If you look at the statistics on it, I think it's got like a 70% fail rate. It's not, even Alekine, who claimed that you had to play it in
He didn't use it a lot, did he?
He didn't matter. No, anyone who uses it pretty much loses. So, but so on a King's Pawn opening, the general response with the reply of the King's pawn defense, I don't know what that's called, is then to attack the piece and neglect defending it, and then forcing you to defend it, and that's
Oh, yeah. Yeah, now I have to watch my piece, don't I?
right. And then
And there's numerous replies I suppose I could do. Now,
Right.
now, what if I did this? I've seen people do this before. What is wrong with bringing up my bishop? I'm defending my pawn. I'm developing my bishop. I've got a diagonal. Why is this not a recommended move in general? What do you think of when you see that move? I know what I think.
Well, if you know what you think, you should tell me, because I don't know what to think when I see it.
It completely stymies me. The main problem with this move, in my opinion, is it blocks your queen pawn.
Oh, that it does.
You simply cannot bring out your queen bishop. You've already put yourself behind the game. Now you have to make another move in order to get your bishop and queen side technically
Yeah, and
arranged. So if you're going to put a bishop out there,
the other aspect of
either here, here, or here, but never in front of your own pawn in the opening so that it blocks your development.
the other thing that I see is that you will lose tempo with that, and
Absolutely.
you want to kind of try and move every.
What do you mean by
piece-
tempo?
Yeah, you want to try and move every piece only once in the beginning. And that's a really powerful tool that sometimes gets neglected. If you can avoid moving several pieces,
Several times.
exactly, one piece several times.
All right, let's illustrate that.
A very famous game that you can see where
You do an opening and I'll keep talking. You do an opening and I'm going to start moving one piece all the way around and you show me
Okay.
the problem. We'll illustrate this issue.
one of the games that's very interesting to look at that is Alekhine versus Reddy. I want to say it was a 1948 game. Very great game, and in the very opening, Alekhine ends up moving his king's bishop twice, and he was angry with himself. He constantly wrote about how he felt like it was a weak move he had made.
See, that's not so bad. Now I'm out of danger. So I'm fine that way. Well, I can plainly see that I'm going to have to take this. Let's see now. I'll take that pawn. I'll move right there. See, I'm safe. Okay, now, look at the difference in this chessboard. What do you see?
Now, when I look at this board right now, I see a game where I predict White's going to easily win. One of the
What?
Definitely. You only have one pawn moved. You have no center developed. I have my pieces are open and mobile. I have my knights out. I have my bishop out. I don't have a king-sides castle going on yet, but I'm going to move in my next couple moves. I'm going to move this pawn forward. I'm going to move this bishop. I'm going to castle, and I've just used 2 moves and a castle. I'm 3 moves in, at which point I don't really care what you're doing. You're still, at best, going to have only a knight,
A knight.
and a bishop on the board at best.
At best, that's true. Yeah. One of them.
And see, at this point,
So that's about what it would look like.
And
I could still get a castle in, but still, yeah, I'm still really badly underdeveloped compared to what.
and then at this point, I would say we're in the mid game already, and this is where I need to develop a plan and then move it into crushing you. And one of the things that I immediately see when I look at this board is how weak your king side is, and I see that there is a huge gap on this long diagonal right here. And then talking about the center, that's going through one of those pivotal center squares we talked about. And so if I can move my bishop, my queen, to right there, then I'm starting to put pressure on your king side.
Piece of cake, I can block you doing that.
That's fine. I'm going to drop my bishop to right there then and put pressure on your
Yeah,
rook.
but then I can just simply move out of danger.
Let's take a look what I can do here. I want to move my knight into play, and I'm pretty sure I want to move it right here.
Yes, but then I can just threaten your knight.
I don't think that was a great move, my knight here, the more I look at it, because
Okay.
if you take and I take and then you take, I'm down the exchange.
Or I can just chase you off. The problem with what I'm trying to show here is Jeff is exactly correct with putting pressure on the king side. You start moving one of these 3 pawns, you are weakening the queen side. Because I moved these pawns, this central pawn, the G pawn, Jeff has a permanent home with his bishop, and my king is cut off from ever going this direction. So that's why you don't want
to just start moving willy-nilly pawns or pieces like Jeff was saying. So that's a pretty good illustration. That's not bad. All right, you've told me before that as a general rule, we should probably develop our knights first before we do our bishops in the opening. And since we've been talking queen pawn, I'll open queen pawn. So let's kind of explore. You go ahead and let's start playing the game, and I'll pull my bishops out first and see why it's probably a better idea to get my knights out before my bishops.
Now, at this particular move,
it's a Giacomo piano.
it's not a Giacomo piano at all.
I know that, but that's the move on a bishop on a Giacomo piano.
No, it's the white. Anyway.
Yes, I know, it's the square, Jeff, the square. My bishops are going to beat your knights.
Right, so at this point, I want to attack your weak pawn. See, do I want to do that? Yeah, I'm going to move my knight here.
Knight there. Okay.
Put some pressure on your pawn. Attack this contingent square.
Okay, and I'm going to defend that pawn.
Bring out my other knight.
And also defend my bishop. And I'm going to pull my other bishop out here.
What I see right now with the defending your pawn with this pawn, I think you've already lost tempo. Because where you only have 2 powers developed and I have 2 powers developed, my next move, bringing out my bishop to protect my knight, gives me another power on the board. And you don't have a whole lot going on here.
Sure I do. I can take your knight.
Sure. Now again, now I definitively have 2 powers out where you only have
one. I only have 1. And I started out as white. Now that is an interesting situation, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, the move where you lost control is when you pushed this pawn.
And by developing the bishops first, I noticed too that I've got this diagonal. Across this central section, I've got this one square. However, with your knight, you've got this one, your queen, you've got this one, plus a lane right through to me. So your central control appears stronger than my central control.
All right, amateur chess hour continues.
All right, amateur chess hour, let's do it, dude.
There's a concept that I like to teach, teaching my son Robert, he's 7, in chess, in the opening, and I like to call it the 2.5 pawn rule.
2.5 pawn move.
2.5
You can't move a half a pawn, dude.
Well, that's right.
Unless you do it this way.
That works.
And nobody likes it that way. What do you mean, 2.5 pawn moves?
2.5 pawn moves. A pawn move is considered a full 2 squares.
Okay.
In an opening.
Okay.
And then a half move is only 1.
Oh, okay.
And so the general idea behind it is that you only want to move 3 pawns total, 2 full moves, and 1 support half move in the opening. And you really want to restrict it down to that. And when you think of that rule, when you start thinking, well, do I want to do this or that, you really don't, because it violates that rule. And in the long run, it's a solid rule.
Okay, should we play an example to show?
Let's play
to show
an
the
example.
power of that.
I do want to point out before we do that, though, that the half pawn move, a fianchetto in chess. I say fianchetto. I think you call it fianchetto.
I call it fianchetto, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right either.
Is when you move...
The point is you move the bishop on the side.
Like that, which allows it to attack on the long diagonal, and it hits that center pawn.
So you're covering half the center with the fianchetto, so that's not necessarily bad.
It is not a bad move at all.
In fact, there are several openings that...
Yeah, it's actually one of the...
That use this.
One of the nice advantages of chess theory, one of the basic thoughts, is when you bring out your bishop from the opening. If I end up moving my bishop over here, then the idea of fianchettoing the other bishop isn't a bad idea. Bring one out through the center and fianchetto the other one. That's a pretty common theme in a lot of openings and variations, because that allows 2 bishops attacking down
Yeah, and
board.
2 bishops give you total control over
Right.
both colors, too,
When
doesn't
the
it?
bishops are getting along with each other, when they're not X-raying each other, but they're attacking in tandem.
Bishops get along with each other? Oh, we're talking chess bishops.
Chess bishops, yeah. when they attack in tandem, side by side,
That's tough.
that's. But if you look at that formation that we were just discussing there's 2.5 pawn moves still. So
Yeah,
we're going
I
to
see.
discuss that theme and control the center, of course, in this next.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Ha! Queen pawn. What a punk move.
It's a great move.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Really? All right, well, what if I did that?
It's a very interesting move. I want to point out that while we've been talking about controlling the center, and this does put pressure on the center, that's a horrible move because this right here is the weakest square on the opening of the game. The only piece that protects this square is the king. And the moment I see that this is open right here, I know you're not going to fall for a fool's or scholar's mate. I'm still going to protect myself from it, or I try and put myself in a situation where I can't exploit that by opening up something for my my king's bishop to get in there. I'm going to claim both center squares with that example.
Huh.
At this point,
then,
I have easy access with both bishops to develop.
so that is the advantage of opening with your central pawns, as opposed to, like for instance, if it's someone who, well, all right, I'll just keep playing along.
Right?
Okay, so technically you've made 2 full pawn moves and I've made 2 half pawn moves.
Right.
So I still got 1.5 to go.
In that mathematics, yes, you do. And I really hope you use them just like that.
That way I'll have 3.5 and I'll be ahead of you, man.
Now, at this point, although I usually say don't mess with the queen early in the game,
Right.
I'm going to check your king.
Ah, see, I've got you right where I want you. Now, look, I can make another very powerful developing pawn move and threaten your queen.
You can.
So,
definitely.
see, pawn moves may not necessarily be so bad.
It might not be.
I take it you disagree with me?
I'm going to just
Completely.
bring my queen down to probably right here. And it may have looked like a throwaway move, but I've weakened his pawn structure more.
Very important point, huh?
And he still hasn't developed anything. I still have room to bring out my pieces. So.
Well, in that case, I am going to develop something now. Now that I know what I can do.
And then I've pinned this piece. I've pinned it.
Yes, but I can threaten your bishop with my pawn.
You can. I'm going to drop my trusty
Bishop down to there,
bishop
huh?
down to there. And I expect, since you've been moving pawns, to just move another pawn to threaten him.
Well, why not?
Sure.
I can drive him completely away. See, now I've gotten rid of the pesky bishop.
You've gotten rid
I
of the
can
pesky bishops.
fianchetto my bishop
And
now.
I would like to point out again that I'm not as developed as I want to be, because in this game, I've been moving my bishop before my knights.
Oh, how interesting, yeah.
And as I've mentioned before, you want to do knights before bishops.
Knights before bishops.
This
Go
is
ahead
another
and pull
example
your
of
knights
why,
out.
because now I've been moving my bishop instead of developing other pieces, trying to exploit another weakness, which is yours just moving pawns willy-nilly. And I don't know what your pawns are doing out there. I think they're trying to have
They're
some sort of
acting
yard
as good
party.
targets.
But I'm still gonna break out the barbecue and something. In the meantime, I'm gonna start pushing some. Some other power pieces here. I'm gonna bring up my.
Okay, now.
And then this
now.
also is another interesting point. King side before queen side, generally speaking. I allow myself the quick.
Oh, and then
castle.
that way you can castle.
I can castle. I've got some
Okay,
pieces on the board.
but when I move this pawn move again, another pawn move, you got to admit it does prevent your knight and it does stop your bishop from coming to here. So that can't be bad.
I'm sure it can be.
So I just recently pushed this pawn here. And my idea with pushing the pawns is that I'm going to limit him coming to here and limit his bishop. But look at what it does against me.
What I see right now is take your king's knight. Your king's knight is limited on where it can move.
Yeah,
The
I
two
can't
best,
move here.
those two squares are taken. He can only move here. Your bishop is hedged in. these are all blocking your bishop, and even if he tries to move his king pawn here, his bishop is still blocked by this piece. His queen is blocked from easy access of going anywhere. He has no defense for castling on either side.
So that's the problem with moving so many pawns in the opening, is you limit your own development, whereas Jeff has open lanes everywhere. He can castle, he can pull out his other
I've got
queen, knight, and bishop.
I still have some good outposts left for my knight. Even if I develop my pawn here, I still can bring my queen's bishop to here, my knight to there. So my pieces are still slowly moving out, but they're not hedged by my own pieces. My defense hasn't become a wall that I'm trapped behind, whereas his defense has become a limiting factor in what's going on the board. Plus, it's completely open for my bishop. That's just, look, there's an avenue of attack there, there's an avenue of attack there, there's an avenue of attack here, here.
And there is no avenue of attack here. There isn't even an avenue of development in this, because I have completely made my dark squared bishop not bad, absolutely horrible. And my light squared bishop will have a little access, but not near as much. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawn moves here, and it has completely eliminated me using half of my army. Because if I can't get these guys out, I mean, I can go here and castle. But so what?
You actually cannot castle because of
there's
my,
nothing here.
My bishop
And
stops
see,
you.
Jeff, in a smart-ass sort of way, said I can't castle, and he's exactly right.
But
that's the problem with making so many pawn moves.
Right, at the
in
time,
the opening, absolutely.
it did look like I was just sort of willy-nilly moving my bishop around, but I ended up on that diagonal through the center again.
Through the center.
That
Yep.
adds that pressure that we were talking about, that vital.
And Jeff is going to take serious advantage of this. He will never exchange my dark squared bishop. Why? I have defeated my own bishop. Keep it here and let me be cramped, stopping my own development. Look at Jeff. He's got a couple of pawns here, but he has access out to here with his bad bishop anyway.
The other thing to look at...
And his bishop out here is running a good diagonal. And he's got potential outposts like crazy once I keep moving the pawns. So
and speaking of outposts,
limit your
with
pawns.
this pawn move right here, I've also limited the only piece he has developed. If this piece moves here,
yeah, I can't move there.
It's captured by my pawn.
I can't
Can no
move
longer
there.
move there, captured by
That's
my pawn.
the classic Steinitz rule I've talked about in several of my videos.
If he tries to take my pawn here, I'd probably take with
the knight.
my knight or even my queen
Or your
or my
queen
pawn.
would
It
be
doesn't
good.
matter. I can develop more. I can protect. I've got so many avenues. So where he is limited on what he can even move out, even what he has developed is severely stunted behind his own pieces.
Stunted. That's an excellent way to describe it. When you make too many pawn moves, you really do stunt your game. That's a good way to describe
And then
it, Jeff.
the other thing to look at is that all of the moves, again, are centered around what's going on in the center. So although we haven't directly spoken how everything affects the center directly, you can see how all of our reasoning is about this is what's going on in the center, thus this is what's going on the board. Now, if you, another rule of thumb to decide who is controlling the board.
Well, that means this pawn move on my knight, especially a stab like that, and this pawn move on my rook end and this pawn move on my knight end have essentially been just wasted moves.
Absolutely.
I've given you 3 free moves, in other words.
Right.
Because what no, that doesn't even have anything to do with the center. That you can't. Now this one does.
It does.
It's an indirect.
And this one does as
suppose.
well.
And this one does, but these. It's not a good idea in the opening to move the wing pawns if you can at all help it. See, I have nothing going on in the center, and Jeff's going to be able to just mow me over.
Look at the Swiss cheese.
What if
Look at that
what if he
outpost.
moves here?
Yeah,
and then look at that knight outpost, and in the meantime, where am I going to go? Here?
I would love for him to move his... If he moved his knight right there, I'd probably move my bishop back, but I'd love to keep his knight right there.
Yeah,
I'd love
absolutely.
to keep like an avenue of escape open but taken from him, like move this knight right here and let him know that, yeah, he can move it there, but I'd take it so that this piece sits there and he feels like he has some power with it, but really this piece is as lame as this bishop is over there.
No, nothing is as lame as this bishop. Moving that many pawns has I may as well take this bishop off the board. That's the effect that this opening has with too many pawn moves as opposed to the power. So I hope that illustrates to you
the serious importance of, like Jeff has been saying, 2.5 pawn moves at most, if you can at all help it, and get your pieces out on good squares. And if you see your opponent making 3 or 4 pawn moves, let him. Don't take his pawns. It would be foolish at this point, in my opinion. What do you think, Jeff? If Jeff started coming here and trying to attack those pawns, are you kidding? I'm helping him with these pawns.
I want to exploit your weaknesses.
Absolutely. Not eliminate.
Not liquefy.
Yeah, exactly.
You liquefy
right.
when you can exchange a power for power. Right now, these pawns are so beautifully placed for my advantage. I want to put my knight there.
Well, let's just look at this.
Yeah.
What would a knight outpost like that do to Black's game?
I always call this the rake. When you can get your knight right there, you rake the board. I've got this knight, and he's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like Osama bin Laden in a cave.
That knight,
no one knows what he's going to do.
That knight would be absolutely superior to any bishop I could put in this game at this point.
That knight on that outpost is more powerful than a queen.
Yes, a true story. He's not exaggerating. A knight on an outpost like that is screaming stuff there.
When you've got your knight right in these 2 squares, or these 2 squares if you're black, and you're protected by a pawn especially, I mean, it's like...
And then you got a backup of the bishop.
This is called indirect pressure, because although my bishop isn't protecting it, so my pawn's in the way, he's still a force behind here, and if I push the game to exchange down this pawn to allow, and then I could even have later a discovered check. I've got my bishop attacking this square. If I get rid of this pawn and then eventually move my knight, I still have another attack that I've uncovered. So now I've got multiple attacks going on possible in a situation like this. I don't necessarily have it right now, but I can set the game up to exploit that, which is what my focus would be in this game.
And that automatically gives you your plan. If your opponent's going to keep pushing pawns and limiting themselves, then that automatically presents you a plan to go ahead and attack. Because, one, your opponent's playing too timid, too passive, what we would call passive play, and then he's not playing correctly with all of those pawn moves. So, hope that helps you see why 2.5 pawn moves at the best, at the most, for an opening, and get your pieces exploited, developed.
And I don't want, again, to stress, importantly, these are general rules. There are times when, making another pawn move is critical. And never have a brilliant move that you think, wow, if I move this third pawn, this third full pawn move, make 3.5 moves, I'd be breaking that rule, so I don't want to do it. But you know if you make that move, you have a linchpin that you all of a sudden can create go on and make a smart move.
Make a smart move.
But if you don't know what to do, if you're looking at the board and you're like, I don't know what to develop here, the game is very neutral. How can I give myself a slight advantage? That's when these general rules of thumb are such a great idea to give you an idea of where to go. By not having anything planned out but trying to stick to sound chess principles, we then have tactical surprises that have developed on the board.